Now, here, where I want to talk about this a little bit is with regard to intergroup and intercultural communication. And what we're talking about here is if people who represent different groups, like I represent this group that's called like professors and teachers or older adults. You represent this group called college students or young adults. Um, uh, you could also have, my cultural group is I'm African American or I'm Latino or I'm Anglo, or we've already talked about we're a member of a biker group. We don't want people necessarily to do and look like us because they're not us. So it's where you have groups that have some sort of defining characteristic that makes them different from other groups. So whereas in peer interactions, convergence is perceived positively because it contributes to equality and rapport, uh, but when interactants have different communication styles based upon their group identification or they're culturally based, how do we then think about how the interactions play out there in terms of convergence, divergence, and maintenance? So, the tension may be complicated if one interactant is from a dominant group and the other from a subordinate group. And by dominant group, I mean one that has the power to be able to exert its influence over a subordinate group who may not have as much power as that dominant group. And this is typically what we oftentimes hear about with groups who are historically underrepresented, such as people from minority groups or people who, for some other reason, may have less power, maybe based upon socioeconomic standing. So, the way you could see these dynamics working out, we ask ourselves a question: do we see ourselves as an insider or an outsider to the dominant group? So, am I part of the dominant group or am I not? Do we see alternative resources within the dominant group? If I'm in a subordinate group, may I gain something by becoming like the dominant group? And then how much group pride do we have? How important is it for me to maintain my group identity? Even if I'm in a subordinate group, how important is it for me to be a member of that group, even though I may have less resources relative to a dominant? And so in the model of intergroup communication that we have here, this is related to communication accommodation theory. Do I perceive resources from the other group? I'm a member of one group, but do I perceive resources from the other group? So we've got yes and no, and then the other dimension is how much group pride do I have? And we could say low, and we can say high. All right, so let's look at our 2x2 there. So let's see if we're in a situation where I don't have much group pride. I grew up in the country, and there are hicks out there, and I don't have a lot of pride being like that. Do I perceive resources in the other group? Yes, indeed. If I could become like them, I act like them, I talk like them, I dress like them, they can reward me with a number of things, and then I can benefit myself and advance within the dominant culture. That's referred to as social mobility. We're not going to talk about that particular one, especially since I'm running out of time for my 15 minutes for this YouTube video. Now, if I have a high degree of group pride, but I don't feel a lot of resources from the other group because I just don't care anymore, then I'm not going to be like them. I'm going to be like myself and my group, and I'm going to dress a certain way. I'm going to be distinctive. I don't want to look like these upper middle class people. I want to highlight, say, my ethnic pride, my group affiliation, whatever that is. I'm going to dress that way. I'm going to talk that way, and I'm going to act that way in order to maintain my identity because I just don't feel that there's much value in me becoming like them, like those people. Be it like I said, a good example is like upper middle class, dress their style, drive those kinds of cars, and things like that. And then the last one is multi-dialectic communication styles. And this is where you have high group pride and you have resources from the other group. We become multi-dialectic because in that situation, I may maintain my style in talking with my in-group members, but I maybe have the skills to be able to act and talk like someone from a dominant group when I'm with them. And we have a lot of people, particularly those of you here who are bilingual and from Hispanic communities, you know exactly what I'm talking about in terms of how you end up talking with people in your own in-group in a certain way, and then you end up talking with people who are more from from like your white friends or teachers and things like that, your Anglo friends and teachers like that, who you may communicate with in using, in talking, in more standard forms or of English and things like that. So at home, you may talk in Spanish. You may act in a certain way that more reflects the cultural practices of that group that you identify with. But when you're with this other group, because there's something you can gain from it by being successful and being able to navigate within there, then you can communicate and dress and talk like them in a way that then makes it easy for you to then garner the resources that you need. All right, so this is about 16 minutes long, so what I'm probably going to have to do is divide this up into two different lectures.